So a while back, I was with a group of friends just hanging out, and one girl was a bit down in the dumps. As we were deciding what to do, she thought she might bounce and do her own thing. I remember we all wanted to give her a big hug, but I don't know, we didn't want to make it worse, and on her part you could kind of see she also didn't want to draw attention to it. On reflection, it's about as British a thing as you can imagine. As she was leaving, she crossed paths with another friend, just arriving, and this girl was wearing a huge yellow woolly jumper. She just flew her arms out in passing and you couldn't not hug. So they had a super quick hug, you know the kind, hardly stopping for a beat before you toddle on with your day. On detaching, the big yellow jumper managed to hook itself onto this girl's nose ring. There was this muffled sigh of relief, which she tried to mask as a moan of frustration, yet the lack of a flurry of thumbs to unpick showed that, in fact, she was grateful to be fixed to her good friend. After an equally badly acted awkward laugh, she just relaxed and sunk into her friend's hug, and she allowed herself to be enveloped in this soft yellow embrace. I remember thinking how this awkward anchoring provided the perfect excuse, how a little bit of copper catching on cotton managed to spear through all of her and our own insecurities about wanting to receive or give a hug. And they just stood there, swaying lightly, saying nothing. It was great.
Headlines for you at 6 o'clock this morning. Proceed with caution. The Prime Minister issues a health warning on a big day of lockdown easing for Britain.
Hugs, holidays and indoor mixing are allowed. We'll look at the differences across the UK.
Social hugs are making a tentative return after a year of being totally taboo, and on seeing how much it meant to people on the news, reminded me that there is a power in hugs that I find really hard to sideline. Seeing grandparents cradle grandkids, and the smiles of the sick and the sheltering who are now allowed to squeeze their family and hold them tight without it being seen as some social stigma. Last weekend, I met with a bunch of old friends in the park, so while the hug and the handshake are in the sin bin, we subbed in namastes, foot waggling and the forever inelegant elbow bump. It amazes me how quickly these things have become normal. I started sketching about it all, trying to work out what it is about a good hug as a greeting that really fuels me and what it is that I really miss. How we hug everyone differently depending on who they are and what they mean to us. And I did a load of drawings and I did 30 paintings exploring all forms of affectionate embrace. And this weird thing occurred to me that despite loving hugs, longing for hugs and missing hugs, as a greeting, I, surprisingly, don't actually miss them at all. Now, many people don't like hugs as a social greeting, and I totally understand that. It is pretty full on. It's also relatively new. Wanting physical contact with other humans is pretty natural. We're mammals, we like being held. The notion that such contact can only occur for men, via a mother or wife, is a relatively new notion over the last 50 years or so. And actually has quite strange roots in the West. If you were cynical, you could argue that it was led a lot by politicians, maybe wanting to seem more personable and get votes in. There's also been a general deformalization, if that's a word, in Western culture, and the great quote of the old fogey formalists who greet their infant sons with a firm handshake and live in fear of the day when they'll have to French kiss their bank manager. Formalities change all the time, and you never see people curtsy or kiss hands anymore, so it's not hard to imagine that a few generations down the line, kids will laugh at how Grandad used to shake strangers' hands or even kiss them on the cheek, as where my dad lives, in France, it's custom to shake every man's hand and give every woman 4 alternative cheek kisses when you first meet them each day. 4. I remember on the daily visit to the baker, we started ducking beneath a neighbour's wall because their large family was visiting, and it cut the trip by 15 minutes, the time it would have taken to swing round every member of that family. There's no standard way that humans greet each other, and the different ways that we do is fascinating. I think a favourite one for me is from Tibet, where apparently an ancient evil king was known for having a black tongue. So as a way of showing you come in peace and you were not his reincarnation, you stick out your tongue. Or bumping noses in Yemen. Or rubbing noses in New Zealand, the hongi, which I think is a sharing of breath. Or clapping your hands in Zimbabwe, where one person claps once and the second person twice in response. Or if you want to be really formal, putting your hand on your heart in Malaysia. Or sniffing faces in Greenland. And a particular favourite of mine is prominent across the whole of Asia and Africa, which is to revere your elders. And you might perhaps touch older people's feet as a show of respect, or drop to one or both knees. And then of course bowing is a big one across many cultures, and that's got totally no contact. And it occurred to me that a full-on hug as a greeting is pretty fucking weird. No other greeting is quite so, well, full-bodied, allowing your personal space to be fully encroached by someone you don't even know. I used to work in an office where people hugged, and I knew some men and women found it uncomfortable. That's fast becoming a thing of the past. Throw in a global virus and hugging as a greeting looks to be on the cultural decline. But maybe that's okay. I shared some of my paintings that I've done with a friend who's not a big hugger, and asked him what he thought of them and what he thought about hugging as a greeting, and he said that he thinks it's become a bit of a quick fix among casual acquaintances. Instead of working to achieve intimacy and understanding, which might result in a really meaningful hug in time, the hope is now that one just hugs and everything else will follow. As unrealistic as most quick fixes in this insta dopamine hit world we live in these days. But say we did totally lose the hug as a greeting. It's not like that's where it was most effective anyway. Here's how I see it. There are very few human acts that exist across the whole landscape of human emotions. One of them is crying, I think, because it's the only thing you do at the absolute extremes of happiness and sadness. There's nothing else. But if you bring another person along, hugging is the only other human action that follows us to every corner of that landscape. We hug happy, sad, we hug in celebration, saying goodbye, in consolidation. We hug to make some people feel protected or to feel safe for ourselves. We hug different people differently. Your friends, your parents, your partners, your teammates, and those who stick with you through thick and thin. We hug in times that matter with people that matter. And so hugs flourish at the jagged edges of life, the emotional peaks and troughs of collective joy and tragedy. And now we've gone through a really unique time where, at those most extreme moments of life, no matter how healthy we are, we've not been allowed to hold those dearest to us, the sick and the dying, at the times they need us most. The elderly, who made us feel so safe when we were vulnerable and new to the world, are restricted to saying goodbye through a fucking phone screen and holding no one as they leave it. This is happening to many people. So in May, when the government said we could hug again, but only for those closest to us, I hope that everyone has somewhere to go and can be there for someone who might not. And if you're not sure, you could always don a woolly jumper and go fishing for friends with nose rings.